what kind of plans that they put up, you know. Implementation is going to be tough for this kind of a plan. But they're doing it, and they've been doing it year after year after year, and they're stepping up their goal. They're moving full force ahead with this one world government. Like I said, we're pretty much fully, the infrastructure is all set up. Right now, they're implementing it. And this is where we need to resist. The resistance has to take place, or they're just going to get their one world government, destroy our life as we know it. You know, not just here in the United States, but everywhere in the world. The power to quarantine an entire city and halt all travel in or out of that city. The power to enter any home or office without a search warrant and order the destruction of any belongings or structures deemed to be a threat to public health. The effective nullification of the Bill of Rights, your right to due process, to being safe from government search and seizure, and under presidential declaration of a national emergency, you know, you can't even remain silent. You know, you can't invoke your Fifth Amendment right. None of this means that federal agents are going to march through door to door arresting people at gunpoint if they refuse the vaccine, but they could if they wanted to. That's what I'm saying. This infrastructure is set up. It's in place. It's ready to be implemented. And as soon as they can mind control enough of the population into go along with this kind of barbaric tyranny, then they will roll out on the American people. I mean, they've done it in certain neighborhoods. You know, they've been testing this for a long time and testing the American people. This is a scientific dictatorship where they've studied how humans behave, how they react, and how they can be manipulated. And that's exactly what's going on here in modern times. Your rights as an American are no longer recognized under this National Emergency Declaration. What emergency? The declaration of this national emergency seems suspicious from the start. Where's the emergency? The number of people killed by swine flu in the United States is far smaller than the number of people killed each year from seasonal flu, according to CDC statistics. People obviously aren't dropping dead by the millions from H1N1 influenza. Most people are just getting mild flu symptoms, and a few days later they're fine. And the people who do die of it have pre-existing conditions, pre-existing medical conditions. Obama's H1N1 National Emergency Declaration could invoke FEMA's response to a pandemic. Another article written by naturalnews.com, Mike Adams. President Obama's declaration of a national pandemic emergency is no cause for alarm, reported the mainstream media throughout the weekend. The declaration is nothing more than a precaution, they say. It's really more of a continuation of our preparedness steps, says Ann Schultz, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases in the USA, Today's story. In other words, there's not really any emergency at all. So why declare a national emergency in the first place? The media reports this was done to allow hospitals to bypass federal regulations concerning the setting up of large-scale triage sites. Emergency medical camps quickly constructed to deal with large numbers of sick people. Like, we really need a national emergency declared to figure out that if there's an influx of people at the hospital and you need to set up triage tents more than 250 feet away or 250 yards away from the hospital, that you're going to do that, okay? Nobody is going to be held accountable for trying to save people, okay? We don't need a national emergency declared for that. I mean, it's simple. So let me get this straight. The H1N1 virus remains mild. The CDC reports that the swine flu infections already peaked out in mid-October. There's been no new developments in swine flu that would cause for alarm, and no reason to suspect huge numbers of sick people flooding into the hospitals. And yet, for some reason, the Obama administration has declared a national pandemic emergency specifically on the purpose of speeding the ability for hospitals to process large numbers of infected people. What are these people not telling us? Something doesn't add up here. Why would the U.S. government declare a national emergency to enable hospitals to handle a flood of sick people when there is no flood of sick people? And the pandemic seems to be fizzling out. There's more like the kind of preparation that you might see in advance of biological terrorism. I mean, and we've been waiting for another government-sponsored attack. Is this the one? I mean, do they know something that we don't? Are they going to unleash some kind of mutation that they've got waiting in the wings and infect millions of people? It is a possibility. They do have the cards in the hole of their hands. The National Emergencies Act and FEMA. Meanwhile, the media ignores the rest of the story about what dangerous powers a declaration of national emergency puts into play. As reported here on Natural News, this declaration effectively ends many civil liberties in America and, at least on paper, puts the U.S. government in position of having the legal authority to force vaccinations on the entire population at gunpoint if they wanted to. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do all this, but they could if they wanted to, and that's not freedom. Real freedom means you have a guaranteed right to be safe from being detained or arrested without cause or injected with a government-mandated chemical. Under a declaration of a national emergency, your freedom is at whim of those who maintain police state powers over you. You're only free if they decide to refrain from exercising the power they have over you. It's the kind of freedom that you get as a peasant in some medieval kingdom where the king says, you are free to go. Why am I concerned? For the first time in this whole pandemic situation, I'm concerned. Not due to the virus itself, because that's a mild virus that presents no real threat to the population at large. I'm concerned about what we don't know might be going on behind the scenes here. Those preparations for large-scale medical triage tents and the emergency activation of FEMA have me worried that the American people aren't being told the whole story. Perhaps a terrorist organization is planning on releasing a wildly dangerous mutation of H1N1 in some major U.S. city, or perhaps some vaccine maker is, in fact, that terrorist organization. And Baxter International sent out live avian bird flu in their vaccines to over 18 countries earlier this year. And they said, oops, that was a mistake. And then they got a contract from the World Health Organization to create a swine flu vaccine. So when you say, well, that's pushing it a little far, saying that a vaccine company might do that. Well, take a look at what Bayer and Baxter has done infecting populations with HIV knowingly. Yes, you can look that up for yourself. And these criminals, these corporate criminals, get away with it. They get away with it. It's incredible. It's incredible. Swine flu scam reaches new heights with Obama's emergency declaration. Well, I mean, a lot of stories came out this week about this. Seems here that President Obama's declaration of the H1N1 outbreak represents a national emergency seems to be little more than a public relations stunt aimed at intimidating resident Americans into taking a vaccine that is becoming increasingly unpopular and unnecessary. Now, the polls are saying people are against this. They don't want to take the shot. In Albany, healthcare workers protested the order put in by the state for mandatory vaccines for all health workers. And the governor rescinded that order. Okay? They're going to get to this in a minute. People are worried about the side effects. Despite a desperate $16 million media propaganda campaign on behalf of the federal government, it's trying to brainwash Americans into rolling up their sleeves and taking the shot. And we talked about this last week on the show, that they were going to start saying, well, it's short supply, and, you can't have it. Because people always want what they can't have. Oh, my God. And this triggers all kinds of tyrannical provisions that the feds have just been waiting to unleash while empowering FEMA to lock down American cities under a state of medical martial law. Mandatory vaccinations, quarantines, curfews, involuntary kidnappings, and warrantless searches and seizures are now just a heartbeat away because Obama's orders haven't in fact nullified the Bill of Rights. And not only that, he asked the question,